So today we're going to be doing Frogger, the 1981 arcade classic game. It's a really great game, and anyone who's played Crossy Road lately will probably understand the roots of this game. So it's a game about crossing the road and not getting smushed by cars, basically. So I've been playing this game since I was a teenager, and I just think it's a fantastic little game. And so we're going to have fun making it today. I've got a whole bunch of graphics and stuff set up in your starter file. You'll notice that I have a frog graphic, I've got a map, I've got the cars. So I've designed all these graphics for you, but of course you can go in and replace your own graphics if you want to, right? The way I would do it afterwards, after I'm done the coding, is simply get into the costume, and you don't ever want to delete a block that already has code in it. So if you want to change what this guy looks like, simply paint a new costume or pull a new one out of the library or something. So if I wanted to design a new car here, for example, I could just start painting it here, draw boxes, and do all the stuff that I would need to do it. And then I don't ruin the code that's underlying it as well, right? So be very careful about that. If you're working on a file that already has graphics and code attached to it, don't delete the graphics just to get the just to get new ones in. You want to put them on top of the old one by doing it in the costume here. Make sense, guys? So, all right, let's get coding. So we're going to start with a green flag, as we usually do. The green flag will tell us that the program's working. So let's go under Events. By the way, this was coded originally by my son Jeffrey, so I'm actually remixing his file and working on it. My son Jeffrey's 17, and he's a fantastic coder, and he's doing R&D for me. So he made this on Discord along with all the people who were on my Discord server, and they're helping me out with this project, which is great. All right, so we need to set up our variables first. Let's get our lives together here. So how many lives are we going to have in the game? I've already set up a variable for you. Remember, if you want to make a new variable, you can click on Make a Variable, and you can usually go for all sprites and then just type in lives or whatever. We already have lives for you here, so I'm not going to bother with that. So I'm going to set my initial lives to 3. So that's just going to tell the computer how many times I can play the game before I get out of it. Now, Frogger's a little tricky because you're jumping up in the air, and when you're jumping up in the air, you're not allowed to change directions. You have to finish your jump before you do anything. And you also can't die when you're up in the air, right? You always die when you land. So if you're floating up in the air, you can't have a car hit you, for example. It's when you hit the ground that something can damage you. And so we're going to do a couple of variables and little tricks that are going to make it so that you can't do anything when you're jumping and so that you can't get killed when you're jumping. So one of the ways we control that is with a variable called can die. So I'm going to set another variable called can die, and I'm going to set it to 1. So whenever die is set to 1, that means if I get schmucked by something, it will actually kill me, right? If I set can die to 0, whatever is supposed to happen to me won't happen, and that's the idea. So we turn that on and off like a light switch, basically. When we need you to be able to die, we turn can die on, and when we need you to be safe because you're jumping in the air, for example, we turn can die off, and that's how that works. Okay, so we're going to do a forever loop next. And inside there, we're going to set up the code for our fellow to jump. So there's another variable like that that's called jump. If jump is equal to 1, then you're allowed to jump. And if jump is not equal to 1, then you're not allowed to jump. When would you not be allowed to jump? Well, when you're already in the air. We're trying to stop double jumps, right? So you need to be able to... and the other problem here is that you're trying to conform everything to a grid. There's actually a 24 pixel grid by about 15 or so going all the way up the page here. And so when you jump, you don't want him to stop halfway through the jump and then go around, because then he's not going to land on the proper spot. We're going to want our frog to jump to this block, and then to this one, then to this one, then to this one. And if we can change directions halfway through, then he's not going to stay aligned to the proper block. So imagine an invisible grid across this entire screen, and you can only jump from one grid square to the other, kind of like a board game, right? And so we have to be careful careful about that. Okay, so let's go and keep adding to this. So we've got this jump variable. I've already set it up in our variables list here. You can see jump right there. And if jump is equal to 1, we're allowed to jump. While we're in the air, jump will be equal to 0, and we won't be able to do it. So let's start off with an if statement. Yes, it is an if and not an if-else. So we're going to say if jump is equal to 1. So let's grab an if statement out of our control blocks. It's right here. So if, and then I needed the equal sign so to put into this slot here. So I'm going to go to my operators, my green blocks. I'm going to say equals. So I need to say if jump is equal to 1. So let's go to our variables. I'm going to grab the variable called jump, just that little bubble, that little orange bubble called jump. I'm going to drop it in there and change this number to 1. So if I'm jumping, if we're allowed to jump, because jump is equal to 1, we're going to play a sound that makes it sound like we're jumping. I've already taken the trouble to load up that sound for you. It's right here under sounds. It should be in here, and it's not. Oh, I am in the wrong object. So this is a little dangerous, guys. Remember in Scratch that you have to be, it's an object-oriented programming language, which means that no matter what we do, we have to code in the proper object. So the frog has to be taught how to work in his own way, and the car will work in his own way. So I've got some code here that I put into the wrong spot, and I want to get it over to the frog. The easy way to do that is just to pick it up at the top, drag it over to the frog, and you'll see that it kind of wiggles a little bit when you move your mouse at it. Let go. And now I've successfully copied that code over to the frog. Now, to avoid confusion, I'm going to go back to my car and I will delete that. So that's a typical mistake that you're going to make early on when you're starting with Scratch, but hopefully you'll learn how to correct it as time goes on. Okay, so if jump equals 1, I'm now inside my frog sprite, the right place to be. I'm going to start that sound called jump. So let's go to our sounds, and there is a jump sound here. It's the original arcade sound of you jumping inside Frogger. So I've got all the original sounds here. Here's the sound of Frogger jumping into the water. And here's the sound of him getting squashed by a car. And then we've also got the Frogger theme here. There we go, that's beautiful. Okay, so we're going to play that sound to jump every time that he jumps. And so we're going to grab a sound block that says start sound. And the sound we're going to start is the jump sound. So every time we jump, we're going to play that sound. Okay. Now, we want it to move 24 pixels, but we don't want it to teleport 24 pixels across the screen, because that is no fun. So, it'll just look like he's zapping from one spot to another, right? We want it to appear like he's moving there slowly. So what we have to do is have him move a little bit, but do it a couple of times. So 24 divided by 3 is 8. So what I'm going to tell him to do is move forward 8, then move forward 8 again, and then move forward 8 again. So to do that, we're going to need a repeat block, which is here under control. Repeat. I'm going to pop that into the hole here, and I'm going to change that number to 3. So we're inside the if statement, which is inside the forever statement, right? So we keep going through this loop over again, checking to see if jump is 1. If jump is equal to 1, then we make the sound and we start moving forward. So let's move forward 8 steps. We're going to go to our blue motion blocks and grab the very top block, which is called move 10 steps. We don't want to move 10, though. We want to move 8, so I'll change that number to 8. Okay. Now, we want to give him time to jump, and we want to leave just a teeny little bit of time for other stuff to happen in the program. So I think this is something that Jeffrey added when he was making the software for me that just fixed a little bug. So bear with me here, but I'm going to add a little bit of a wait right after the repeat. As soon as I'm done here, I'm going to save my file to the working file for my audience at home. Okay, so I'm going to wait just 0.05, and that's just going to leave enough time for other things to happen inside the game before we do the next thing, which is set our jump back to 0 again. So once we finish jumping, we're going to turn off the ability to jump basically until he's done jumping. So let's go and set jump to 0. Where's our variables? set jump to 0. And that jump's going to stay at 0 until we hit a keyboard command to make him move again. So it's not going to accidentally jump him until we hit the keyboard command that tells him to jump again. And so the idea is, even if you hold down the keyboard key, you're not going to spam jumping. It's just going to, it's only going to happen for a second, and then it'll turn off, and you won't be able to engage it again for another 0.05 seconds. And that'll protect against accidental keyboard presses and stuff, I think. Okay, so setting jump to 0. So we're not actually moving now, notice, right? Because we're just setting the trigger for you to move. As soon as that jump becomes 1, we're going to start moving, but we don't actually have any mechanism to turn jump to 1. Now that's going to happen when we trigger our keyboard command. So we're going to get onto that next. Okay guys, so we're ready to start moving our frog around now. We're going to set it up for keyboard commands. You can go either WASD or arrow keys, whatever you want. So when I say up arrow, you guys at home know that you can go swap that for a W key, or you can even set your software up to go with either. You can go, if I press a W or an up key, have this happen, and that's a really convenient way if you have players who like it both ways, and you never know what your players are going to like, so it might be a good way to set it up. Okay, so we're going to start the frog moving only when he receives the command to spawn. So we're going to basically set up broadcast, which is going to tell everything in the game that a new frog has spawned, and it'll get everything all set up properly the way that we want it. So I'm going to go and I'm going to launch that first spawn of a frog right here under the green flag. Okay, so I'm going to go. We're going to go to our events, and we'll go broadcast an event. And I'm pretty sure we've already created one called spawn frog. No, we haven't. Okay, so I'm going to type that here, spawn frog. So right at the beginning of the game, we're going to have a frog, and then when we die, we're going to have him go through a little death animation, then we're going to spawn a new frog. And so every time we do it, it's going to start him off in a new location. Okay, so or back in his original starter location. So let's go and tell it when it receives this spawn frog message, it's going to go into this loop where it's checking to see if we jumped. But meanwhile, it's going to jump over to the spawn frog message. When I receive spawn frog, so the program's going to branch off and start doing everything that's underneath this command here. And we're going to set up a few things before we get started here. Number one, we want to set jump to 0. So we're going to set our jump to 0 right at the beginning, because we don't want to be able to jump until we hit a keyboard command. So just in case that jump variable is something different, we're going to make sure it's 0 right here at the beginning. Now, yeah, I think I can skip that part for now. Now we want to get the starter position down so that every time he starts, he always spawns back in the same position. Otherwise, he's going to spawn in the place where he died, which is no good at all. So my Scratch program already knows the starter position. I've just taken this guy and I dragged him to the middle of the map. And now Scratch knows where that starter position is. Actually, it updates it right here under the move command. So you'll notice that, just for the audience who hasn't seen these yet, if I move this frog around a little bit, you'll see that the numbers changed here on the side. Now it says -6, -168, instead of 2, -167. So every time you move this guy around, it'll record what his current location is. So you never have to write down XY numbers. So I'm just placing that right here. So I grab that out of the tray. Oh, not glide, sorry, I'm go to command. Go to XY right here. And so no matter where I go in the game, when he receives that spawn frog, he's going to pop right back to the middle again. Excellent. So now we just need a forever. And we're going to grab a few if statements. They're going to say, if I press this keyboard command, this is going to happen. If I press this one, it's going to happen, etc. So let's go under our control blocks. We'll find the one that's marked forever. And everything inside there is just going to keep looping over and over again. All right, so we need to say if, okay, so we're going to do 2 if statements inside each other. You can do this by going if this is true and this is true, but I think we're going to do it this way today. So I'm going to put an if statement here. The first thing we need to check is that jump, or that we press the proper keyboard command. So I'm going to say if I pressed the up key on my arrow, so I'm going to go to my sensing to find that button. There's some keyboard input commands here. There's one called key space is pressed, and that's the one I'm interested in. I'm going to drop into the hole here, and I'm going to tell it if I hit the up arrow, then I'm going to point my frog up. Well, we need to do a few things first. So if I press the up arrow, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check. Oh, let's shrink this again. We're going to check and see if that variable is going to allow us to jump. So we're going to check and see if jump equals 0. So if jump is equal to 0, then we're going to be able to jump. And if it's equal to 1, then we're not going to be able to jump. That's the opposite of what I said before. Okay, so that's the way Jeffrey coded it. And I might have explained something wrong anyway. But okay, so let's just keep going with this. So if jump is equal to 0. So we're going to say if jump is equal to 0, then we're allowed to jump, which means we're going to point in the direction up because we're pressing the up arrow. So let's go to our motion blocks. We'll grab one here that says point in direction 90. I'm going to grab it and put it in there. And remember, when you click inside here, it gives you a little arrow that lets you point which direction your little froggy is pointing. So let's point him straight up, which is direction 0. And then we're going to set that jump to 1. Oh yeah, so if you're, I think I got this straight now. So if I'm not jumping, we're going to point, and then we're going to set jump to 1, which is going to trigger a jump. Okay, so I had it right at the start. I just got confused there for a second. So now we're just going to, instead of actually jumping, we're just going to set that variable, and the other script is going to pick that up and know that it's time to jump. So we're going to go to our variables. We're going to go set jump, set jump to 1. There you go. And so as soon as the jump becomes 1, it's going to trigger everything that's happening here that's going to make the guy jump. Let's test it out here. I'm going to maximize my screen, click the green flag, and now when I hit the up key, let us pray. There we go. We jump forward. Beautiful. Nice. Now you can see the water doesn't affect us. There's nothing else happening right now. And we can't move down or left. But so that's the basic mechanism that works with. Looks good? All right, so now we just have to go and add some more keys to that. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can do a duplicate here. But remember, you have to be clicked on the right spot inside your screen here to duplicate properly. So if I hold my mouse over this part here, it's going to duplicate everything inside of this if statement. If I put it in the wrong place like this one, I'm going to get just part of my code. Or if I click here, I'm only going to duplicate this part of the code, right? So it's whatever is under or lower down or inside something else is what you're going to grab. So I don't want to grab the forever. I'm going to move my mouse over this if statement right here, and then I'm going to right click. That's 2 fingers down on the keypad if you're on a Chromebook. And we're going to go duplicate. And now I have another block of code. Whoa, and I dropped it by accident. Be careful about that, because I've actually put it in the wrong place and I've messed everything up. This if statement should be right underneath this one. And so I plunked it in the wrong place. I'm going to put it right there now. And beautiful. So now notice they're all parallel with each other. The one if is above the other if. The if that's inset is over the other one. Now I can be sure I pressed it in the right spot. Let's change our information around. We'll go if key down arrow is pressed. We're going to point down 180. And then we can just quickly duplicate it again. And we're going to go if left arrow key pressed. We're going to point to the left. And then the last one's going to be if right arrow key is pressed. See how quickly we can build code using these duplicate commands. If you are just dragging each of these blocks out of the side, then you are doing it wrong, guys. You will get frustrated by coding if you have to lay down every block on your own. So start to use that duplicate function. It's the pro MLG way to do coding, guys. All right, so let's give it one last test and then we'll be good to go. Green flag. And now I can move forward, left. My right is not working. I've coded something wrong. I probably changed the keyboard input. Let's go have a look. So you guys, this is how you troubleshoot a game like that. I know where the problem is. The problem is where I'm supposed to go right. And in fact, I don't have a right. I have a down here at the bottom. I forgot to change this. You'll probably have made the same mistake at some point as well. So just troubleshoot it that way. Play test your game, see what's wrong, and then you can jump right to the part that you know is wrong, because this is the part that was supposed to be making me turn right. Okay, try it one more time. Click green flag. Back to starting position, left. Oh, I did it wrong again. What? So right arrow, left arrow. Oh, right arrow, but I'm not pointing to the right. Ah, I tricked myself here. Pointing to the right. One more try. Ready, go. Forward, left, right, up, down. Okay, we're good now. Excellent. Okay, guys, so that's our basic movement cycle for this program. And now the next thing we can do is let's get those cool cars moving across the screen. So Jeffrey's gone ahead and designed a little car for me that looks a lot like the cars in the original Frogger game. I think he probably used one as a reference. You can see it's very, very low res. When you look at images like this close up, it's hard to really tell what they are. But once it's down on the screen and you're viewing it fairly small, it definitely does look like a car. We're going to do some fun programming tricks to make it look like there's lots of cars all moving in different directions. We're going to be using cloning to make copies of these guys, but we're also going to be using color commands to make every car look a little bit different from the other one. And we're going to use some other really clever commands to make the cars go in opposite directions. I really like the way that we've coded this thing, so I think you're going to learn something here. Let's go and get into the code. So we are now programming the Frogger car, which is this pink thing. If you are still inside the frog and coding that, then you are not in the right place, guys. Okay, so let's start with a green flag. I'm going to go under events. I'm going to grab my green flag. So when the game is started, we got to set some stuff up. So firstly, the map here is a sprite. Sometimes you can set up your map as a backdrop, but in this case, we've set it up as a sprite, which means that there's a chance that when we start the game, this thing could be in front of everything. We're going to have to be really careful when we're making this game to make sure stuff is in the right layer order. If you have a car driving along and then your background's in front of it, you're not going to be able to see the car when it's in front of the background, right? It's going to fall right behind it. So we need to right away tell the cars to move up to the front layer of the screen. So if they're trapped behind the other screen, they'll move to the front. So where's our green flag gone? Oh, I'm on the map now. Let's get back onto my car. When green flag clicked, we're going to go to our looks menu, which is right underneath motion here. And inside there, we're going to find something that says change layer order. So the couple of them here, where are they? Under looks. Change, hold it, where are my layer order commands? I've lost them. Change size, change, oh, a little bit towards the bottom here, sorry guys. So here we are. So there's one here that says go forward one layer, there's another one that says go to front or go to back. So sometimes you'll just want something to deke behind another thing, and you'll tell it to go back one layer. You tell something to go to the front, and then tell something to go behind it by telling it to go back one layer. But we don't need that right now. We're just going to tell it to go to the front. And we want the frog to be on top of it, though. So we actually do want this next one here. We're going to tell it to go backwards 2 layers, and that's going to make sure that it's behind the frog no matter what we do. Okay, now let's have the car go to a starting position. So we're going to start the car right down. Let me make the screen a little bit bigger. We're going to start our first car right in the middle here on the first lane. We've divided this road into 5 different lanes of traffic. We want to start in the first lane right around the middle here, and then we're going to tell him to go left or go right depending on which way he's driving. So it'll all make sense in a second. So let's give him those starting coordinates in the middle, and I can just give you those numbers. So we're going to go to XY, And we're going to put the number 0 under the X. It's already 0. And then minus 147 as the second number. And I think that should bring our car to the proper starting position. It's invisible now. So let's see if we can make it visible again. And there it is. So that is not the right spot for it. That might have been in an older version of the game. So let me adjust that number a little bit. I'm going to drag it up until it's just on the first lane of traffic here. I think I have the wrong background here, and that's part of the problem. That actually is the right number, 147, but I'm still working off of the wrong version of this map. Okay, so bear with me, guys. When we look at this tomorrow, I'm going to have a different graphic in here. I've actually loaded the wrong graphic into the game here for part 1. So I'm going to fix the starter file right after this broadcast and get the proper one in. So imagine that this first lane here is actually, so this purple lane is actually a lane of traffic. And that means that he's in the right place right now to be driving on that first lane. I think according to the proper background that we have here, that this is going to be the right place. So let's just leave it here like this for now. Now we need to tell him to hide, because he's going to start making copies of himself, but he's going to sit there in the middle of the map making copies of himself. We're actually going to shuttle him around. We're going to pop him over to the left and have him make a copy here. Then we're going to pop him over to the right and have him make a copy here. Then we're going to pop him over to the left again and right, just like that, over and over again. So let's tell him to start making copies of himself. So the first thing we have to do, though, is hide him. So we're going to go to our looks menu. We will go hide. Beautiful. And then we're going to go forever. So here's where we're going to be making the clones of ourselves, where it's just going to keep popping out clones, and then waiting a little bit, and then popping out another clone. So let's tell him to wait just half a second. There's going to be a new car made every half second in this game, 0.5 seconds. If you wanted to, you could change this to a random number and have the cars come up a little more randomly, and that might make the game a little more interesting. So that's a potential for you to remix it if you need to. Okay, so now we're going to have each random car, when it's spawned, pick which of the 5 lanes it's going to be in. So we're going to set a random number here. So we have a new variable that we're going to use here called lane, and it's going to pick a random number basically from 0 to 4. So there's going to be 5 different choices, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And depending on which number it comes up with in that random selection, it's going to send the car to that particular lane. Okay, this will all make sense in a couple of seconds. So let's go set a variable. We're going to set lane to, and that's going to be a random number from 0 to 4. Where do we get our random numbers from? From the operators here. So I'm going to go pick a random number from 0 to 4, and that will actually give us 5 choices, right? Instead of, because we're starting at 0. Okay. And then after we pick that random number, we're going to create a clone of ourselves. So let me make this smaller again. We're going to go create clone, which is right at the bottom of the control blocks. Create a clone of myself. Okay, so that's going to make a little car. It's going to make a temporary copy of this car, and it's going to plunk it right down on top of the other guy, right in this position. So as soon as he's born, we have to start giving him commands to do stuff different from what his dad is telling him to do, right? This is the guy that spawned them, the father or the mother or whatever you want to call it, and then he's going to pick a lane and go to that particular lane. Stay in your lane. All right, so now we need to tell the clones what to do. It's a different block of code that we're going to need. So on that block, it's called when I start as a clone, and it's right here at the bottom of control with the other cloning commands. So when I start as a clone, every time a new one is born, what is it going to do? It's not going to follow the same instructions as the original guy. So what are we going to do? We're going to show. We don't want him to be invisible. So let's go under our looks menu, and we're going to grab a show block. It's just the teeny one towards the bottom. And then we're going to make it move up. We're going to change its Y coordinates of the new car to make it go up to the proper height on the screen. So we're going to go change Y. So change Y is inside our motion blocks. Let's go to our motion blocks. So our Y is how high up we are on the screen. We're going to change our height on the screen, change Y. By how much? Well, we know that each lane is 24 pixels high. So if I wanted to go into the first lane, which is 0, I'm going to go 0 times 24, which means I'm not going to move up at all. But if I want to go to the second lane, that means I've rolled a 1 in my random number. So I'm going to go 1 times 24, which means I'm going to move up 24. If I have lane 2, it's going to be 2 times 24, which is 48. So we can very quickly assign lanes here using these random numbers. And that's why we used a 0 here instead of a 1. So we could do multiplication on it and have it do nothing if it rolled the first number. Okay, so we're going to go change y by whatever that number is that we picked, which is the number called lane. That's the variable that we got here. So let's go to our variables. We're going to pick lane and pop it into that hole there. Change y by lane times 24. So we actually don't want the lane in there yet. We want to multiply it first. So let's go to our operators. We'll grab a multiplication symbol. Remember, in older kid math, the multiplication symbol is a star. It's not an X anymore. So we're going to change y by lane times 24. And that's going to start popping our cars into the lanes. Let's have a look at that right now. I'm going to click the green flag. And we're going to start spawning cars. That one's going to go in that lane, another one in that lane. So this will all line up with the graphics once I give you guys a proper fix to the graphic. You can see that every half second it's creating a new car. It doesn't sound like every half second, it's like 1 second or more. Oh, what's happening is some of them are appearing on top of the other ones, so we don't always see when a new guy is being formed. Okay, so now we can get these guys moving a little bit. So here's another cool math trick, and I really like the way that Jeffrey programmed this one. So we're going to tell him to turn around. We want our car to be facing either, if we move him to the right, we want him facing to the left, and if we move him to the left, we want him facing to the right. So we're going to do that through a clever little coding command where we're going to tell him to turn 180 degrees times something. It's going to make more sense in a second. So I'm going to grab a turn command here, which is under motion. I'm going to go turn counterclockwise. It doesn't really matter which of these you use, clockwise or counterclockwise. I'm going to tell it to turn 180. Okay, so I need a multiplication sign here, and this is going to make more sense when we finish it out, guys. So let's just put it all into place here, and then I will describe what's happening. So grab a multiplication sign, pop it in there, and we're going to say 180 degrees times the number of the lane. So we're going to go back and grab that lane variable. So what does this actually do? Let's sit down and do the math here. So if I rolled a 0, it's going to turn it 180 degrees times 0, which is actually 0. So it's not going to turn it at all, right? If I roll a 1, it's going to be 180 divided times 1, which will give us 180, which will make him turn to the, well, right now he's turning right, which will make him turn left. If I rolled a 2, it'll go 180 times 2, which is 360, which means it'll be turning back to the right again. If I go 180 times 3, it'll actually be 180 times 3, which I think is 52 and for 520. Now, if you go more than 360 degrees around a circle, the way that Scratch interprets it is it just starts spinning around a new circle. So it's just going to be the same. So saying times 3 is the same as saying a 1. We're basically only flipping between two different directions. And no matter how high you get with these numbers, it's still going to divide it by 360 and end up coming up with the proper number. It's a little bit complicated, but basically this thing can only come up with two answers, face right or face left, using this math. It's going to be, so a higher number like 520 is only going to make it go 180, which is right, and then left, and then right again. And then if you added another 180 degrees to it, it would flop around that way again. And you're just basically flopping around over and over again like that. Okay, now we want to get him right off the side of the screen. So we're going to tell him to move 135 steps. I'm going to save my file right now in case anyone at home needs the saved version. Okay, so we're going to tell him to move in the opposite direction of the way that he's facing. So no matter which way he's facing, if he's facing left, we want him to move backwards so that he's facing the beginning of the screen here and getting ready to drive onto the screen. If he's facing this way, we want him to move backwards this way so that he's ready to be on the screen. So the entire screen is 270 pixels wide. So basically we're going to make him go 135 backwards, which is going to get him right across the back of the screen. So let's grab a move command right here under move. And we're going to move minus 135. So that'll get him set up in a starting position. Now we're going to get him to change color. Remember I told you we're going to have each one of them look a little bit different. Well, let's do that in a second. Let's get him moving first, and then we'll change his color later. Okay, so let's put a forever underneath here. So now that our cars are positioned, we can start them moving. I'm going to go forever. I'm going to tell them to move just a speed of 4. You could put a random number in here again if you wanted to make your cars move at slightly different speeds, and that might make it more fun. I might play with that tomorrow when we're play testing this game, or next time that we work on this car movement. And I also want the car, if it goes off the edge of the screen, I want it to delete itself. So I'm going to grab an if statement here under control, if, and I'm going to say if I'm touching the edge. So if I go off the screen, let's go to our sensing commands here. We'll go touching edge. And then we'll say we'll delete this clone. So if I'm touching the edge, we don't need that clone anymore. We'll just dispose of it. There we go, good. So now our car should be moving properly. Let's go click and see how this genius code works here. Click green flag, and we start to have cars driving across. We've got traffic going like crazy across our little road now. It looks random, even though the timing is regular every half second. It's just because they're picking a random lane. You never know whether a car is going to be in your lane or not. And you can see that even though the background isn't lined up, and again, sorry, I have the wrong graphic, our cars should be pretty much lined up with the frog now. There's a few things that have to be realigned here. I'm probably going to give you some slightly different numbers tomorrow once I have a chance to play with this. Now you'll notice that nothing happens, of course, when I hit a car, because we haven't set up the collision detection yet that's going to make that happen. Okay, one last step. I want to change the color of the car so that each one looks different. We've got to do that before the forever. So let's go and change the color effect on these guys. We're going to go to our looks command. We're going to grab one of these commands down here, quite a ways down the screen here, that says change color effect by. And we're going to put that right above the forever, the last block by the forever. So there's actually 200 different shades of color that we can have here. So we're going to go down to our random operators here. Under operators, we're going to tell it to pick a random number from 1 to 200. So it will cycle through all the possible colors that you could possibly have in this project now. All right, we are ready to test this again, guys. So here we go. Max the screen out. Click the green flag. And yeah, every car looks a little different from the one before it. That's beautiful. Okay, so we're making some good progress on our game. Tomorrow we're going to add collision detection so that our frog will be able to get hit by cars and schmucked, and we'll do a little animation for that. Then we're also going to start adding logs, which are going to go across the screen, and we're going to have to do some tricky coding to make our frog ride the logs. He won't just so when he lands on a log, he'll actually start sliding left or sliding right, and that's going to be the way that that he moves around on the water. And if he falls in the water, he splashes. So it's the opposite of being on land. On land, you want him to not hit things. On the water, you want him to hit the log, and so that's what's going to happen. So we'll have a look at that tomorrow, guys. We'll see you then.